My name is Michael Pride, and I'm a professor of architecture.
How long have you been here at the University of New Mexico?
Twice as long as I've been anywhere else. I have been at UNM for 14 years, um, just last month.
I know you've had a very storied academic career. Can you talk about the other institutions that you've worked at prior to coming to UNM?
Wow. Yeah. So I'll go backwards. I came to UNM directly from the University of Cincinnati, where I was the director of the School of Architecture and Interior Design. And before that, I was at the University of Kentucky, where I was the director of the Downtown Design Center, um, and an assistant professor of architecture. And before that, I'm going backwards. I was practicing in Los Angeles. I had my own practice called Regarding Architecture, and I started teaching as an adjunct at UCLA and Woodbury and USC.
I know that you have a legacy of working in community engagement. Can you speak a little bit about how you entered into that scholarship?
Yeah, when I saw this question, I kind of take it back because I tend to cry when I think about it. Back when I was in LA, I became active with the American Institute of Architects, the LA chapter of the AIA. And I think the thing that got me um, active with AIA was when there was a big fire in Baldwin Hills, which is a long time middle class Black community where, my childhood friends lived. And so I just kind of answered the call to come and help out with some things. So it was as a volunteer. That really did not prepare me, though, for 1992 when the unrest in Los Angeles broke out in the wake of the beating of Rodney King. Um, by then, I was a co-chair of our Minority and Women's Resources Committee. That day that the decision came down, we were actually doing a tour of a new affordable housing project in South Central LA. And little by little, we could see that there was some antsiness going on. And finally, somebody said, I think we should end this now. And we all went home, um, and everything ensued. Um, and then at another event that was soon after that, um, there were other colleagues, and we're like, we've got to figure out a way that our community can respond. Later, I learned that what we did was create a volunteer community design center. Yeah, that was the Design Professionals Coalition. We were trying to figure out how to coordinate among all of these professional organizations in LA. I mean, as large as LA is, you may not be surprised to hear that there were like 2 dozen organizations with architects, landscape architects, engineers, contractors, those. And it was just impossible to cover all the ground. And we said, we'll just take care of this part. Um, so that was my deep dive into community design. I mean, with the mentorship, guidance, help, advice from other colleagues who had been part of the history of community design, we started helping. We started helping first property owners, and then that led to communities. And that was when I was like, wow, this is it. This is what I want to do for sure. And we started integrating community engagement and community involvement practices in my firm. Um, and so it just really snowballed like that. And it was just like, I need to do this full time. And I learned about university-based design centers and set my sights on that path. But I want to go back even before then because I think about my parents. Well, my dad never was licensed, but worked as an architect for his whole career. And so that's where I learned what architects do and resolved that I wanted to be an architect. My mother was a kind of committed to social service as a side gig. It wasn't her work, but she belonged to organizations that were committed to social service. And so I think I learned service from my mother and architecture from my dad. And so I was primed when the opportunity presented itself to do this.
That's a good segue into bringing variety of disciplines together: architecture, urban design, public health. What inspired you to bring those fields together in your scholarship and the work you do now?
Right. Thank you. That's a great question. Also, gave me a chance to think about it. The urban design work really came out of that work in Los Angeles. There were Yes, there were destroyed individual properties, but we soon learned that there were whole communities that were either impacted and or they were just underserved, right? And there were a couple of initiatives around that. One of them was the Los Angeles Neighborhood Initiative, which kind of helped put together um, community development corporations together with planning uh, expertise and to rethink different parts of their neighborhoods as part of the rebuilding of Los Angeles. And the Crenshaw Neighborhood Group said, Michael, we want you to be our planner. And I'm like, I'm not a planner, right? And it was like, no, it's okay. I'm like, no, really, I don't have experience in that. And, lucky for me, they said, that's all right. We'll learn together. And there were planners in the community that I could learn from. And so we did that and learned together. And I was like, this is really what I need to do. And I need to learn more about working at this scale of neighborhoods, not just how to do it, but why, the kind of theoretical underpinnings. And so I was like, I've got to go to grad school for that. So I went to grad school for that. Um, you know what, Tim, that I didn't share? When I decided that this is what I needed to do for my life and my career, I applied for a job at DPAC at UNM.
That's amazing.
Yes.
Comes full circle.
It comes full circle. So it took about 20 years for me to get that job.
That's amazing.
But yeah, I think there was an ad, and I was just like, yeah, I love New Mexico. Let's go, you know. But I didn't have a master's degree. So that was a real sticking point. And so that was part of what I needed to do was get a master's degree, go to graduate school. And through that process, I just figured out what I really wanted to and knew what I wanted to learn, or kind of.
Right. We're always learning, right?
And so then I got my master's in urban design, and worked my way here finally. And it was actually Mark Childs had done a couple of initiatives with colleagues in population health, or now population health, and introduced me. And I really came to appreciate the kind of scientific grounding in public health and that there was this niche there, or this around the built environment, and learning how the built environment was one determinant of health. Uh, and so I was like, wow, that is kind of my proxy way, or it so correlates with the work that I wanted to do for communities that were underserved, um, underrepresented, low income, etc. You see through public health science the disparities in outcomes for those communities of color and low income communities, and learning those kind of strong connections to the built environment was just like, yes, here we go. Yeah. And plus the colleagues, fantastic.
Well, that's a good segue into DPAC. Can you talk a little bit about your role in DPAC and maybe a little bit about the kind of work you do?
Well, I'm quite fortunate, honored to be the director of the Design and Planning Assistance Center at UNM. And I think that's what I wanted to do here. Um, I didn't get that title officially until 2020. Oh yeah, good time to be a director of a community design center. But I had worked in DPAC from the first day I got here in 2011. So I've been teaching in the DPAC studio year after year, and also was part of a couple of successful grant projects. So we got an Our Town grant from the National Endowment for the Arts with the city of Albuquerque and some other organizations, as well as working alongside the Main Street projects. And it's just been, you know, I was right, in 1992 or whatever, when I said, this is what I love and want to do, because it is still what I love and want to do, even though it's not always easy. Um, does that answer your question? What do I do with TPAC?
I guess maybe a good way to frame that is maybe you could speak to a couple of projects that you've been working on or have had tremendous impact in our communities, and what the role that the students have played in that.
Right. I think the biggest impact that I can point to is really with students and faculty who get to really know communities in a way that they different than what they may have perceived or even thought about. And seeing students actually care about those communities and figuring out how they might continue to be involved. I saw that in Cincinnati as well, seeing students even start up a small, I'll call it a nonprofit business as their side gig, um, in Over the Rhine, where they developed this program to do painted board ups. There were a lot of vacant buildings in this historic neighborhood. And they were doing these they painted the plywood so that it would look like a window with a flower box and things like that. And I was just like, I can't believe you're working here now. And they choose to live there, work there, kind of dedicate their weekends to these neighborhoods. That's fantastic. And here in New Mexico, um, I think being part of a Main Street program is really powerful because that comes with resources for the community to kind of implement the ideas. We see in some projects that are before my time, like the farmers market in Santa Fe, now one of the most famous farmers markets in the country, and just packed on a summer Saturday. Um, and then um, I wanted to talk a little bit about the Santa Fe Midtown project, which you brought to us, Tim. Thank you. That is probably one of the hardest projects I've ever worked on. But with that introduction, the city hired DPAC to conduct the public engagement process for considering the redevelopment of that now called Midtown site. It was that old College of Santa Fe campus. And I think in this instance was, for me, the closest I've come to really acting on, implementing, and living the principles of community-based participatory research. And in that, we partnered with 9, local community organizations, all the way from community organizers to healthcare providers, arts organizations, etc. And to see the work that we did together, co-creating every aspect of the engagement, co-writing surveys, analyzing the data together, really community engaged, analysis, as well as everything else. The real highlight for me was watching our community partners present the results of our work to City Council. And not just the verbal part. They put together the slides, they wrote the presentation, designed the presentation, and delivered it in English and Spanish, and really moved City Council. And then that work was then informed an actual policy document.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
It was a wonderful project to see evolve. I thought that
Yeah.
was, you guys did a wonderful job. So
Thank
yeah,
you.
congratulations.
This is every week it was like, I don't think this is working.
It did have its challenges.
Yes. Well, it's very intense.
Yeah.
It's just intense.
Yeah, it was
That kind of work.
Yeah, particularly.
It takes time.
It does. It takes a
And
lot of
it
time.
takes relationships
Yeah.
and building trust.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the other impacts I see, the 55 years of work of DPAC, is that communities all over the state really trust us, right? With their visions, with their dreams, and that's awesome.
That's wonderful.
You've been a part of that.
Yeah, no, it's such a great state to work in because everybody seems to know everybody. So if you do good work, you tend to have, other work coming down the line. So
That's right.
I think that's the benefit of the state of New Mexico. So I appreciate that. I'm going to kind of move forward a little bit. I think, when you see yourself as an academic and, a leader and a person of color, what do you think is important, for, the work that you do in communities, but also as, a scholar in the world today? What are the things that you think are important for our students to start to really acknowledge in terms of this type of work that we do?
I'll answer it in 2 ways. One is from my own experience, that work in Los Angeles. Part of what I came to learn and appreciate was that even without formal training, the Black communities with which I worked felt like they could trust me because I'm Black, even if I didn't know all the ins and outs of planning. But they trusted that I was an advocate for them and would carry, their message forward. And I, tend to like to dismiss that, it's like, well, I'm not from here or there, or, but I came to appreciate that there. I came to appreciate it at Cincinnati when I became the school director. I guess I was the first woman also to be in that role. And when some of the women students told me on bowling night, that they were just so happy, they felt so kind of seen and cared for because I was in that role, that they were going to do well, and I just had not appreciated how much that alignment of identity mattered to people. So let's take it forward to our students here. I think it's so important for our students to, they come here because they are optimistic. They have an idea and a dream of improving communities, especially communities that they come from. And this idea, I'd love for them to realize that their own experiences are super valuable. It's that their experiences, their identities, plus their training can really be a superpower that they can take back to their own communities and other communities that they care about.
As you start to kind of look forward in terms of your career, what are the things that you would like to see happen, say in DPAC or even in the profession? What are the things that you think that we really need to focus on to move the discipline forward?
Very good question again. And this is something that other colleagues are, we're engaging in that conversation now. Stephen Luoni in Arkansas has brought up this subject of the profession of community design. And we tend to, for most of the history of this work in academic institutions and schools of architecture, is that it's like a good thing to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like on the weekends, at night, 10% or whatever. But to increasingly see how this way of working can be such a valuable professional practice. And actually, what I'm working on right now is looking at assessment, and we really see through like the current NAB conditions, the ways that community engaged teaching and research really bolster and contribute to the goals of accreditation, which is a goal toward, a professional practice. So, or important steps. So, we also see that more and more in our graduates and the places where they work. They're being asked to do have some level of community involvement, do community engaged work. They appreciate the bringing community in to their process. And so I think this is going to be a really important skill set for us to develop in our students so they graduate with that knowledge and some experience in it.
Fantastic. I think this is going to be my last question because I think you and I have had the opportunity to teach design thinking. At the core of design thinking is the notion of empathy. And, I think working in the spaces we do, we definitely have the opportunity to provide that to our constituents. And
Yes.
so I just wonder, like, how do we build that even in further in the work that we do in academia?
Wow. It's interesting that I had not brought up that word, but empathy is like at the core of it, right? Because without empathy, you can't be an effective advocate, not to mention, being an ally, if you will. And so I think, how do we gain empathy? It's through contact, right? Through experience. Um, so part of this community engaged teaching is making that introduction for students to people with different experiences and different power, right? And trying to have students understand how they can leverage this power they have, even if they think that they have little, that they can help leverage or partner with the power that everyday community members have, and with their power that they're developing can really help somebody else. I think when they see, oh gosh, can I just tell another story?
Sure.
So last semester, do you remember when we did the toilet project?
I do. I do.
In 2019,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
which it was remarkable watching students get excited about public toilets, right? So I felt like they had to have some kind of sense of empathy, right? Well, fast forward to this past year, and we were asked to consider helping with warming and cooling supports for people who are living rough on the street. And our community partner, who's an ally, an activist, organized our issues forum, which is now part of our pedagogy of the DPAC studio. And so we did it at the International District Library. All of my students who were fourth year undergrads, and we had somebody from the new Albuquerque Community Services, somebody from the Health Equity Council, and two people who had lived on the street. We're no longer, but one fresh out, 2 months. Before that, one of my students had said, I don't think I can do this project because I have no empathy. And I just can't relate to this community of people living on the street. And I'm afraid to go there or whatever. So, but we had that issues forum, and everybody talked, they had we did rounds of 10 or 15-minute talks, so they got to have just, like two students and one person. And after that, the student told me, thank you. I understand. Right? And when she had a choice of any project to do, she decided to design like a fountain that could be for hand washing, foot washing, face washing, for people who are living on the street, and and pair it with a place where the Hook It Up group could do their pop-up events to support people living on the street. So yeah, that's a powerful one.
That's a great story. Yeah. Well, I think we're educating a new generation, and the work that you do is great. So thank you so much.
Thank you. My name is Michael Pride, and I'm a professor of architecture.